It's a genuine pleasure to welcome Yinka Shonibare here for this talk and to have you here in person, finally. And it has been an extraordinary experience working with you, Yinka, and your team on the exhibition and the catalog project. A very warm welcome. I may give the audience now a short insight into your artistic career so far. Yinka Shonibare's work has been exhibited all over the world and collected by major museums and collections. His list of accolades is extraordinary. To name a few, in 2004 he was nominee for the Turner Prize. In 2010 he was commissioned for the 4th plinth on Trafalgar Square in London. In 2013 he became a member of the Royal Academy. He was awarded an MBE in 2004 and a CBE in 2019. And this year in March, he was awarded the Art Icon Award of the Whitechapel Gallery. He was born in London and raised in Lagos, Nigeria. He returned to Britain at the age of 17. And he studied art at the Byam Shaw School of Art and the Goldsmith College. In the 1990s, he started working with the Dutch wax batik fabrics, which are a product of trade and colonialism, and which function for him as an instrument to address the legacy of colonialism and questions of identity, representation, class, race, xenophobia, and migration. He explores these topics through Western episodes of art history and history, and through the entanglements of Africa and Europe. He's a keen observer of social developments and of shifts in power and economy and ecology. And his work is beautiful, playful, but also dark, and always with a certain degree of irony in it. In 2002, Okwi Envisor selected his work Gallantry and Criminal Conversation for his documenta, and today Yinka Shonibare is one of Britain's most accomplished contemporary artists. So for the structure of this talk, Yinka and Thorsten will be in conversation for about 45 minutes, and then we will open up for questions. Thank you very much.
Yes, Yinka, also a warm welcome from me. So I'm extraordinarily happy to have you here. I'm really honored. So I can remember that I saw your work for the very first time. I think it was in 2002 at the Boijman van Boijming Museum in the Netherlands. Double Dutch was the title of the exhibition. So it's really a great honor. So, and I also want to take the opportunity to welcome Caro Akpokere, who is one of the artists. He's sitting here in the audience, who's one of the artists participating in the exhibition. This world is white no longer. Views of a Decentered World. An exhibition you can see at the Rupertinum. That is our other venue here in Salzburg. So. Warm welcome also to you. Yinka, it's for me really interesting that you are using titles in your name. So you was named member of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire in 2004, and then commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire in 2019. and you append the past nominal letters CBE and as of late RA, Royal Academician, so to your professional name. So why are you doing this? I mean, it's a sort of ambivalent gesture.
Yeah, well, first of all, I must show my appreciation and say thank you for this exhibition. And thank you for the invitation. And thank you also to Marijana, who also worked very hard on this exhibition. So I really appreciate it. And I can say that I did read your both of your essays, and they were very good. So I had to do my homework on the train before coming. so thank you. Okay, so the question about accepting the honor, a member of the most excellent order of the British Empire, and also then the second one, commander of the most excellent order of the British Empire. For those who don't know, this is an honor given by the Crown it's an order of merit, and it's given for services in different disciplines. Because the title has empire in it, a number of artists and radical poets, for example, of African origin or from other former British colonies, refused that honor. So this became a kind of a gesture of protest to refuse the honor. And I absolutely understand that. In my case, I thought that when, the whole idea of empire, that's something that's very, it's a symbol of repression. It's something that, people of African origin like myself wouldn't like to think about empire just because of what the empire did to my ancestors. But the reason I put myself back at the center of the establishment is that most of my practice is anti-binary. So I oppose the notion of us and them, subject, object. I want to actually dissolve this notion of there are some people on the margins and there are some people in the center. And so, after many people have refused the honor, I would just be another refusenik, which will not really be registered. Actually, it's much more radical to take on the power and then appropriate the power for myself. So that's why, in so many words, I accepted, and I use this deliberately as a way to put myself at the center of power. And it is a refusal of the notion and the concept of the other.
I maybe have to add that in Austria, titles of nobility are forbidden in more than 100 years. So since the end of World War I. And so in Austria, people like very much titles. So, but today there's only privy councillors or something like this as a title. So that is really because the end of the Austrian Empire, the Donau monarchy, double monarchy, that happened in 1918. So you already mentioned the idea of a post-colonial hybrid. That it has been a sort of label for you. I was sometimes tired of this label. I'm asking that because 1 year ago I had a talk with Fiona Tan, from the Netherlands. So, and she told me, because she had also a sort of label. She mentioned once in an interview that she feels that she's a sort of professional foreigner. And then in every text she heard, okay, this is Fiona Turner, this is the professional foreigner, that is the artist who had a multifaceted origin. And she, for her, it was like a sort of cage difficult to come out of that stereotype.
Well, for me, hybridity is actually the basis of all creativity. So if you're going to be insular and you're not going to appropriate from many cultures to create one culture, you're not going to be a creative person. It's like a DJ playing only one sound. I'm not interested. Mm-hmm. You know, you need to, there will be no Picasso without Africa. The whole story of Western modernism was actually inspired by world cultures. So Picasso put together his own traditional Spanish images, along with African images, along with Western images, to create Picasso. So you are not a creative person if you put yourself in a box and you close all the doors and you close the windows. So then, the concept of hybridity for me is the ultimate concept of creativity. Mm. It is openness to a multiplicity of languages and cultures to then create something new. So I'm very proud of my African origins as well as my British origins. And without this Creole language, this mixture, I don't exist. So for me, this is not a box. This is a window into a multiplicity of rich creativity. So I feel very lucky that I can be hybrid and influenced by so many things.
So it's part of your identity.
It's not only part of my identity, it's the essential identity of a creative human being. Mm-hmm. Is to be open and to be open to encyclopedic ideas and to not close yourself. So if you create, in fact, to oppose this would be, in my view, to take a position which is narrow and therefore nationalistic, which is actually tantamount to almost the F word. I will not say that. But so therefore, hybridity and contamination is an essential part of human creativity.
Mm-hmm. You already mentioned Picasso, and you had, I think, the exhibition closed yesterday at the Stephen Friedman Gallery in London, African Spirits of Modernism. And and you already mentioned also appropriation. So Picasso appropriated African art.
Yeah.
That is very, and we know that from the texts by Picasso that he joins the Musée de l'Homme in Paris many times, and to see West African art, and then he built up a collection of West African art, as many other artists also did. So we always know that from Max Ernst, not with African art, but with American art, art of American natives, and also recently an artist like Georg Baselitz, he has a huge collection of West African sculptures. So what is your reaction on this in this exhibition?
So, first of all, before I did this exhibition, there was a lot of stuff in social media about appropriation And the power relations there, the difficulty of people taking, for example, an indigenous American image and doing something with that. And I understand because of the power imbalance and history and the way that the works are not respected, this became a big issue, in social media and conversations. Historically, because the important point to make, I want to make an important point about the agency of the other. Now, what I mean by that, the right of somebody who is not Western to take Western images, make it their own and play with it. They have a right to do that. In the way that Western artists historically, they have always taken from African culture, different cultures. The artists you mentioned, the modernist artists, they also collected in Max Ernst, Basilisk, Picasso. No one will ever question a Western artist taken from Africa and collecting it, and even Brancusi, using this in their works. It's not a problem. When an African artist makes work which looks Western, everyone says, oh, it's derivative. It's not very good, they're just copying Western art. But so actually, but you see, I don't fundamentally have a problem with Picasso learning from African art and even Western modernism coming out of African languages of abstraction, right? People need to understand this. When they're looking at Western abstract art, they need to understand that in Africa, people were doing that thousands of years ago, right? So abstraction is something that the Westerners also learned from Africa. But then, ironically, African art is seen as primitive, right? This is sophisticated, this is art that's very complex and abstract. And Picasso was a clever man. He saw that he could learn something here. But I don't give Picasso a problem for learning something from this. This is completely okay by me. But if I want to use Victorian, imagery in my art, don't give me any problems about this, because, Western artists have been doing this for a long time. So the show that you talk about, I took from Picasso's collection of African art. First of all, the show has two purposes. The first thing is to celebrate the creativity of my ancestors. And secondly, to look at the history of Western modernism and go to the origin of the history of Western modernism and also create works around that. So, so that's really the purpose of the show. But politically, that show really is about saying, actually me as a contemporary African, my ancestors also contributed to the story of contemporary Western culture through modernism. So I'm not a primitive at all, so this exhibition is a way of just reminding people about that, reminding people about this.
So one could say, if we take the title of the exhibition here, End of Empire, that could also be used in the context of Western art. So the domination of the art world by Western art. So, but we have here in the background, we have this work, End of Empire, that has given the title to the exhibition.
Yes. So, the work behind us is called End of Empire. in the UK, there was a celebration of 100 years of the First World War, and many artists were invited to make works across Britain. And so I was one of the artists commissioned to do that. I was very interested in the contribution that African soldiers made to the First World War. The First World War was a global war. The First World War was also a war which challenged the Austro-Hungarian Empire. That war was, and then it was also after the First World War that many African countries struggled for their independence and subsequently gained their independence. So the First World War was really essential even to the independence of many African countries. And I was also looking at the whole issue of conflict and conflict resolution. Now, conflict resolution is usually about negotiation. But to negotiate, you have to lose something. One side gains something, another side, you lose something. So there's usually a degree of balance in which either side of the party, they have to be prepared to give something up. And so the idea of the seesaw, because those are two opposing sides of the First World War, and the idea of the seesaw is a constant shifting in the debate and how you also regain balance. But conflict resolution is never finished. It's a process of constant negotiation. And so the process of constant negotiation is represented here by the movement of the seesaw up and down. And the globes on the heads are, the maps at the time are representing the two opposing sides, of the argument. Yeah. So, and then of course you can see that their clothes have been sort of hybridized, as it were, changed. So, again, conflict it's a process of metamorphosis or changing. Yeah.
So you talked already about the globes. So we have also the idea of remapping the world. That is quite important, because the thinking about the world is sometimes very much influenced by cliches. So it depends always from your point of view. So and when you look at maps from the Middle Ages, then the world concept of Christianity in the center of the world, and the more primitive, the more simple life at the edge of the world. So that is quite typical for the cosmography and the Middle Ages. So you used one of the very famous maps from the Middle Ages, Hereford Mappamundi, that is from around 1300.
Yeah.
And you try to make a sort of playful reinterpretation, because we can see it over there on the right side.
So the ones on that side.
Yes.
The images came from the oldest map of the world, the Mappamundi. And in this map, I saw that foreigners were depicted as, because people didn't travel much, so on the map they imagined the way foreigners looked. And the foreigners were very strange creatures, upside down creatures growing from the ground, and all kinds of really funny, strange creatures. But this is a medieval map. And it's very interesting that from the medieval period until now, our ideas of foreigners haven't changed. I mean, maybe, they depicted them in very strange ways, but we're always scared of refugees because we have some very strange ideas, like what's going to happen if the refugee came to your house to eat? Nothing strange is going to happen. You're probably going to have a good time. But I thought I also try to find the humor in the way that we think as human beings. So that's why I do kind of playful things with these things. So some of the aliens are they got parachutes and very playful because sometimes you have to laugh with the way that we think as people. So that's why I make this kind of humorous. But with that project, I actually worked with, so in Hereford, the Map Mundi is in Hereford Cathedral in the UK. But I wanted to do something in which I would work with communities considered on the margins. So there were refugees and also some people with, learning challenges. And so I did the drawings, and we created the quilts together, and they stitched that together. So that's how we made those pictures, because I wanted them to be part of the process. Yeah.
The other side of hybridity is, and that is your concept of art, to emphasize hybridity. But on the other hand, you are constantly frustrating any desire of authenticity, in the sense of longing for something that is original and pure, or something like that. So could one also say that your artistic concept is based on a sort of friendly subversion?
In a way, all of what I do is about subversion. It's about trying to make the world in a new way from my own point of view. So the whole idea of hybridity in my work starts from this point. That I have to create something, because you mentioned maps earlier. Now, in the past, when people talked about international, they didn't mean international. I mean, even in the 80s, when we talked about international was Germany, America, UK. That was international. The biennales and that was really international. Remember, there was a show in France called Magiciens de la Terre, Magicians of the Earth. Do you remember this exhibition? So after Magiciens de la Terre introduced the idea that actually there are artists in other countries. They're not only Western. Now this show was very controversial because there were many self-taught artists and other artists who were introduced to this exhibition. And the whole idea of non-Western artists being magicians was also felt very kind of condescending and almost insulting, because there are also many conceptual and contemporary artists from Africa and different places. So that was the problem with this exhibition, right? Okay, let's accept the problem, the kind of anthropological kind of viewpoint. So that's a problem. But what this show did, it actually transformed the idea of what contemporary art could be. And so following this exhibition, and now we understand that many museums and biennales started to include artists from quote-unquote what's regarded as the global south. And then of course we know that the curator later, Okwi Amweso, he was then able to do, he did Venice Biennale, he did Documenta, and this is so in terms of the global conversation about art, this was a big transformation. But my generation, were just starting to come into being at that time. What my own art education was not really about David Hammond's or Jean-Michel Basquiat or anything like this. My art education was about Matisse and Degas and Ingres and Delacroix, and that was my art education. But then equally, feminist art and queer art. When I was at college, I was most interested in people like, Judy Chicago, Cindy Sherman, Carolee Schneemann. They were radical artists who were really challenging, the patriarchy. So I could identify more with Carolee Schneemann than I identified with Delacroix. So, and I think, so this change made me also think, Then I remember I went to the ICA in London and I saw an exhibition of works by Rosemary Truckle. And I thought, wow, actually, you don't have to be a painter, you can do anything. You can take fabric, she was knitting, I don't know, those works she did with the ballet flowers. Yeah, so I was looking at this work and this is crazy. I don't have to do this anymore, like the academy. I was like an academic painter, painting from the nude and all this. This is what I was doing because this is what we were doing in the academy, and I could, for a change, I could relate to, I could relate to this, and the ICA in London was very important, and yeah, so that's the kind of context anyway.
Yeah.
And then of course, thought texts, Rashid in the magazine, that I also read thought texts and saw that art from the global south could also be in the center. And so this is so in terms of mapping of mine, I want to make art that will acknowledge my own history, that will acknowledge people like me, but not only acknowledge people like me, put us in the center of global debate. We are just as mainstream as any other artists. Not like before, when international, I was excluded from international. It was only America and Germany. Immendorf, Baselitz, that's international. That was international. But but Baselitz, you can take a break now and that give, we also.
Yes. but things changed. I can remember when William Wesor curated Documenta, that was an eye-opener for many people in the Western art world to see how big, how many other views, how many other traditions, so that could be in the center of the artwork, and I think that was a sort of beginning. But I think I also want to talk a little bit about role play, because that is a key issue in your work, and many people know this iconic photographic series Diary of a Victorian Dandy. So, and we have it here in the next gallery, and that has been at that time extremely provoking. So I think today it's you talked about mainstream, to be mainstream in the art. So I think today it's accepted. It's maybe mainstream, but at that time, maybe you can explain how provocative it has been in the 90s when you exhibited the works.
Yeah. They were made for the London Underground. So, and as you know, millions of people go in the underground. I didn't want to make a show in a gallery. I wanted to make it in the London Underground. And so I managed to persuade some people. I was a young, relatively young artist then. I didn't really have a track record, but I wanted £100,000. And I had to act like I was very confident to try and get this. Anyway, I managed to do this, and I managed to make the work. And it was quite controversial because people didn't know, is it a film, is it a poster, is it, what's this work about? And the image was unusual because usually in those historical images, when you saw a black person, that person was usually, in a more subservient role, maybe a valet or a, but I wanted to put myself in the center. And then the series was also partly inspired by Hogarth's Rake's Progress. But those were kind of, moralistic works. My work wasn't kind of moralistic. It was just basically, kind of celebrating this whole notion of the dandy, or the idea of the dandy, the kind of, the political other who then challenges the establishment through his style. And so, so the project then went on to, I went on to show the project at the Photographers Gallery in London. And, the project was nominated for an award, but immediately, when I first did the images, they were kind of a bit shocking at that time, but now they're completely normal.
And you feel very much attracted by the representative public of the Baroque, the Rococo era. So, and there are a lot of gestures. So the aristocracy is much more what it represents. It's difficult to say what is the nucleus of the aristocracy, because it's the representation. But it seems to me that this representative world, there's a deep fascination in your work for this, for the decadence, for playing roles, for being something different, for masquerades. So what is your point? Where is this fascination? What is the reason for that?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so you're talking to me now, right?
Yes.
Do you believe in yourself? Do you believe that you are genuine?
No. Not at all. So.
Okay.
Yeah. No. But it's. I mean, that's an interesting. It's really an interesting discussion. So because I read your work as a sort of that you are criticizing this idea of authenticity, and I think that is very important. That is a key issue, because that is so people are so much talking about authenticity and to feel and to be like this, and nobody can tell you what it is. So
okay, so first of all, we're all actors, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm sure if I will see you with your family, it's different how you are here. Maybe everybody sees you here in the museum and says, "Oh, such a nice guy." And when you go home, maybe you're different. So basically, first of all, particularly with us Africans, right? So people want you to be authentic, to be like Rousseau, nature, and to be close to nature. Kind of some kind of romantic idea of the quote unquote noble savage. There's no such thing actually. We all present what we want people to see, right? And then there's also, the stage and masquerade. It's a form of power. So, in the Caribbean, during the period of slavery, there was one day of carnival where the master can dress like a slave, the slave can dress like the master, everybody can kind of indulge their fantasies, you can act, right? So I find the whole idea of acting, or the whole idea of wearing a mask, I find it very powerful. I think that you take the stage, and in this time on the stage, you control what happens to your life. Mm-hmm. And this is a period of empowerment. This is a period in which you can make red blue, right? And this is your space. So I use theater and performance as a way to take my own power back. So I control what's happening in this space, in this time. And so this is absolutely essential. Mm-hmm. And politically, I own my own image. If I want to become a dandy, this is my space. I can do this. Mm-hmm. You know, so mm-hmm. I can't control what the politicians are doing, I can't control, but on the stage, I control everything. You know, so for me, this is actually a moment. This moment of performance is for me the moment of taking power and control. Mm-hmm. And I don't, you know, I'm a liar as an artist. I don't, you know, so morality or the moral space. And the morality is a question of consensus by the community. Mm-hmm. So what is moral today is not moral tomorrow, depending on historical time and context. So morality is a relative concept. So when I'm on the stage, this notion of morality, for example, in the African library you have here, yeah. I included the dictators there, and also I included the champions of liberty. It is not my point to be the custodian of morality in my art. So on the stage, I'm not interested whether something is right or wrong or good or bad. This is not my problem.
So I think that is a very, very strong anti-Rousseau statement. So thank you for that. Can you tell us a bit about the idea of Un ballo in Maschera?
Yeah. So this film, Un ballo in Maschera, was made at the time of the Iraq War. Mm-hmm. And so America, you know, went into Iraq. Britain joined also. And then I was doing a project in Sweden. And then I was doing another project, in fact. And then at the time that I was doing that project, I discovered the story of Gustav III, who was fighting wars in Russia. And his citizens were starving. But he loved to go to the ball and to dance and to have fun. And so it was very decadent. And I thought I could, so this opera, this Verdi's opera, Un ballo in Maschera, I could reimagine this opera without sound. And I could recreate this. And I could also change the gender of the king to a woman. Mm-hmm. And I could change the person who assassinated the king into a woman also. And then I didn't want to have a male king killed by a female assassin. I thought this was not complex. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, so I had a woman killing a woman who was also a man. Mm-hmm. So the woman was ambivalent also. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, I tried to recreate this, but it's important to recreate this without Verdi's opera, so without the sound, and to completely remake this. I wanted to perform the body of the dancers was very important. Their breathing, you can hear the sound of their feet, everything. And this actually happened because I was at a ballet in London, and I was sitting near the front of the stage. And I realized I wasn't concentrating on the orchestra. I was actually concentrating on the sound of the feet of the ballet dancers. Because I found the sound of the ballet dancers, of the feet, more interesting than the orchestra. You know, so that's how I decided, you know, I would make it work also like that.
I think I also want to talk with you about the antique sculptures you are creating since about 5-6 years, maybe a little bit longer, and the idea of classical sculpture in Europe, and you are presenting colorful sculptures, but closely referring to classical sculptures, many of us know well-known sculptures, but your sculptures are now painted. So yeah, you are not using fabrics as you used before, but now it's directly on the sculpture, so on the surface of the sculptures. And but you are also addressing a special idea with that.
Well, so when Donald Trump was in power in the U.S., and the many right-wing groups were kind of growing, and even just before Donald Trump, and so the alt-right in the United States, they were using classical sculptures as a way to promote the ideology of the superiority of the Aryan race. And then, of course, and there was an art historian who suggested that the whiteness of those sculptures, Johann Winkelmann, meant, it was an expression of the superiority of Western culture. And of course, we know that those sculptures were not white originally, they were painted. The paint, over time faded, and so that when they were discovered, they were white. So I decided then to reclaim, because I see culture, all culture, as belonging to the world, actually. I don't think it belongs to one group. And I think we can all learn. Culture is something which is made, we make them. So I decided then to change the head of the sculptures into the globe as my own kind of universal symbol, and then to return color to those sculptures. And then that takes them away from this kind of pure idea of symbols of high Western culture, which is then superior to other cultures around the world. So that's how those colorful classical sculptures evolved.
Yes, the Western image of culture is really important. I mean, maybe it's a hard break, but before I want to open for questions, you are working with a foundation, and this foundation, Yinka Shonibare Foundation, wants to work with the exchange between Nigeria and Europe, or Africa and Europe. Can you tell a bit about your idea?
Yes. Well, first of all, we know that historically, my ancestors were brought to the West as slaves, historically, and we. Many people read Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. That's the idea of Africa many people had. And that's changing a lot, because now we have social media, we have Instagram, and many young African artists are in fact based in Africa and selling their works in the West. And so people are becoming more knowledgeable. It's becoming quite trendy to collect African art. Many auction houses, Sotheby's, Christie's, are selling African art in their auctions. But many people have a kind of a superficial notion of what Africa is. And so I've always been interested in pushing the boundaries of contemporary art and supporting a younger generation of artists. So in London, I created a space called Guest Projects. An artist would drop a proposal, in a box outside my studio, and they would do a project there for a month. But I've decided to expand that project to make it more international. And so to create an exchange between Africa and the rest of the world. So I formed the foundation, which is the Yinka Shonibare Foundation. We have a project, we have a space for artist residencies in Lagos. The building is going to be finished this October. And we have a small gallery / studio space, and we can have we've got 3 bedrooms for artists who can stay. We also have a 54-acre farm about 2 hours from the city, so approximately 54 football fields. We have a variety of crops that we grow. We want to support food sustainability and also bring researchers who want to, in agriculture, also artists can stay on the farm. So we have a farmhouse, and then we will also always have artists from Africa, different parts of Africa on the residencies, and we are going to do a number of public programs, so that when the artists come, they might stay about 3 months. They make a presentation to the local people. And we will also collaborate with local institutions. So in October, and in Lagos, there is an art fair called ArtX. So we will do a soft launch this October, early November. It's not because of the pandemic. It won't be an international launch yet. But I'm hoping that next year we can do a proper international launch of the foundation there. So that's broadly speaking what the foundation is doing. Yeah.
Yes, that sounds like a very, very ambitious and fantastic project. Also, I think it's also necessary, important that there will be collaborations with institutions in Europe
Yes.
because it's time that we have to learn something.
Oh no, I mean, I have to advertise for my foundation. So for people who think that they want to support us, we have a website, and we have our foundation staff in London that they can liaise with. And we very much want to work alongside many institutions, because, and individuals. I'm an artist, I can't do everything. But of course, we are very open to collaborations from individuals and other institutions. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Yinka, thank you so much.
Okay.
So for this talk, and I want to give the opportunity to the audience to ask questions.
Sir, I would ask you, the relations between Africa and Europe have been always rather close because of trade and the imperialistic, the colonies. And how would you describe the ties from Africa to Asia, China especially, because there is not such a colonial history? And is there a relation in artistic work now, or is it increasing, or does it exist?
Well, I mean, my understanding is that because of the opening up of China, certainly there are more exchanges between Africa and China at the moment. And the main reason for that is that African countries don't have to face many kind of historical issues and questions when they work with Asian countries. So issues around, governance and democracy and Western ideas. My understanding is that African countries at the moment find it easier to work with Asia because of those historical difficulties are not there. So I certainly understand that with infrastructure, for example, the Chinese government is collaborating on a number of infrastructure projects in Africa. Now, there are, as you always know, you don't replace one empire with another. So there are local complexities regarding that too, in relation to that relationship. That it's kind of very controversial, but it's not my specialist area, so I can't speak further to it.
But maybe I may add, we have a work in the exhibition, This World is White No Longer, by Samuel Fosso. And Samuel Fosso is always performing in different roles. So and he has one work that is Emperor of Africa, and there he is performing as Mao Zedong. So it's funny, but it's reflecting the real situation that the collaboration between China and Africa is much more intensive, and we in Europe can imagine. So
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yes. My name is Eva, and I would very much like to ask you what life is really about. Thank you.
Wow. Do you know?
Well, I have an idea. Yeah, but I would love to listen to you, Yinka. Thank you.
Well, I think that, obviously, no one alive can answer this question, but what life is about is you're definitely going to die, that's for sure. But then I think that in a more kind of, to try to answer this question, I think you just have to understand that there is not only one point of view. There are several perspectives. And I think if we will all understand that, possibly we may have a reduced conflict. But it's just always understanding that your point of view is not necessarily the right one. There are others who also have an opposing perspective to that. And I think we should, the world should try to understand that. Yeah. So I don't know if I answered that adequately, but that's the best I can do.
Thank you very much for the interesting talk. And so my question is about the Vlisco fabrics. And I think I'd like to know if you have ever considered collaborating with the company to make fabrics that actually further the narratives that you pass across with your works.
Well, they've been generous enough to sponsor some of my exhibitions. I've not actually designed for them. I designed for my own public sculptures. So those are all my designs. And I do these little bronze sculptures. There's one here that kind of look like fabrics. But I've not necessarily collaborated with them. But it's very interesting that you mentioned them because, in a way, my use of those fabrics started as a critique. So, it's not a kind of a sort of unmediated celebration of those fabrics. You know, there's always, I've used those fabrics in quotation marks. And so in a way that they, I don't know if they actually understand that, if they understand that. I've used the fabrics in quotation marks, but nevertheless, you know, they have been supportive of my practice. But it's a critical use of the fabrics. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Leonora, and I want to ask what was your idea about that statue?
Which one?
That one with the... Yes.
With the light? With the light?
No, the other one.
Which one is it? Can somebody tell me which one?
It's the revolution kit she's asking about.
Oh, the one with the gun?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Very good question. Well, he's a naughty boy. He's not, you know, he's not very happy. Right? He's not very happy because some people were telling him what to do, and he wanted to do what he would like to do. So when people say they don't want to do something, some people call it revolution. And so that sculpture is called Revolution Kid. Right? So it's a kid who is being told what to do, but he doesn't want to do it. So he doesn't want to do it. I mean, I'm not suggesting you should do it, but he has a gun, and the gun is to fight back. Sometimes your parents will tell you not to do something. I don't advise you to have a revolution because your parents will not be happy. But that's what that kid is doing. So he's not happy with what he was asked to do. But always listen to your parents, though.
Hello, my name's Kay. What was the revolution kid told to do that he wasn't happy about?
Sorry?
What was the revolution kid told to do that he wasn't happy about?
Okay. So, see, in some countries, there were some leaders, particularly in the Middle East, and they had something called the Arab Spring. And their leaders were telling them what to do. But they didn't like the way their leaders were telling them this. So then they went to the street and they decided to protest. So there's a leader in Libya called Gaddafi. And this leader had a golden gun. And so, because they were not happy with Gaddafi, they, unfortunately, they killed him, and they took his gun, his golden gun, and then they, you know, I guess they kind of went dancing in the street with his gun and with his golden gun. Now, there is a painting by a French painter. The name of that French painter is Delacroix, and he made a painting about the French Revolution. And the painting is called Liberty Leading the People. And one of the young boys in that painting had that pose, and he had a gun as well. So that work is based on this boy in that painting. And so that's what the boy is not happy about. Are you happy with my answer?
Yes.
I was actually wondering if the corona pandemic changed your work or influenced your work, because we have a lot of visitors entering this room and they think immediately about coronaviruses here. So I was wondering, how did corona shape your art?
Well, it's very interesting that you should actually talk about context and time and history, because you interpret a work based on what you are actually going through. So if those, I can assure you, those paintings were not intended to look like the coronavirus. I'd never even heard of coronavirus when they were made. But it's a way to kind of challenge the history of art and the history of painting. So normally, painting is it's not taken from popular culture. It's very high art, very special. I decided to take everyday objects. Many artists have been doing this from pop art to the present. And so I just decided to take, ordinary objects, and also to have the gallery, the space, the wall, the institution becomes part of the work. But the work doesn't appear so serious. But at the same time, the paint is a symbol of high Western art. The fabric is a symbol of fabrics from the market, something connected to popular culture and common people. So this is the way of dissolving the hierarchy within art itself. So it's high art, low art, and done in a playful manner. That's what that's about, but not really coronavirus.
Thank you to you, Yinka. It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay,